Aloha nui kako. Today I have the awesome pleasure of introducing two things. One is a mo'olelo, and the second is a hulukupuna who grew up right at Niuhelewai. So the story that we're going to talk about today is Ke Kaua ma Niuhelewai, or the battle at Niuhelewai, which is that stream that ran through our campus. So this story is actually we hear it from multiple different sources, but I think one of the best sources that I've heard it from was from Kupuna Henry Hanale Machado. Kupuna Machado grew up in Niuhelewai, actually on Rebello Lane, which is right next to campus. And he tells this story that he must have heard growing up as a keiki here at Niuhelewai. So Kupuna Machado was a guest on Kaleo Hawaii, Hawaiian language broadcast show hosted by Kumuleri Kimura. He visited in 1973, and he talks about his upbringing here at Niuhelewai. And so one of the things that he does share is this mo'olelo, ke kaua ma Niuhelewai. So we're just gonna listen to a couple of minutes of this. I pulled out some of the most important things here, but let's go ahead and listen.
O wai ai hea ke ia wahi kahua kaua. Ai no ma palamano.
Kaua ma Niuhelewai o e no o
Niuhelewai.
kahahana o ia ka ke li'i ma o aho nei. Ho na mai o kahahana a lana kila o ia i ke I kaua ma waina e lua lao e lua. Na po e make I kilo I loho ke I kahawai. Pane ia ke kahawai liki me maui. Ya.
Kamaina no pani wai o ia.
Pani wai o ia. Lo aku pani wai ma palama ke kahi.
Ai. O wai ke ali I lua ke kalua o nali o kahahana ke kahi a. O wai ho.
Kahawai ai o ia kahawai ai.
No he o ia.
No Hawaii mai.
Ai.
Ho ona mai luna lilo paha ke ali ke namnawa. Ho ona mai o kahawai o ia ka.
Kaua I hola no la ko mali la.
Ai.
Alana kila o kahahana.
No.
O kahawai.
Make o kahahana.
Oh.
Lana kila o kahawai o kapa I lo ke I mele.
Ai.
Lana kila o kahawai.
Pani I kahawai.
Pani I ke kahawai.
Okay.
Kino. Kilo ilo. Kino palaho.
So as Kupuna Machado tells us, this is a very, very fierce, bloody battle that is very much likened to that famous battle on Maui called Kipaniwai o Io. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pass it off now to Kumutiani, who's actually going to explain this and share about this mo'olelo just a little bit more. Mahalo nui ya oko pakahia pau I ka ho'olohe ana mai. Mahalo.
In 1920, when the Reverend Kivini Dishe presents the story of Kekuhaupio and his famous warrior Kamehameha in Kahoku o Hawaii, he opens with a similar preface to that in He Ka'au no Kau'ilani. He recognizes that this is not a complete account and says to please excuse any omissions, but that we're presenting these stories of our famous warrior ancestors so that the next generation might understand the famous deeds of these brave warriors. And that they might also have pride in this. And he presented this during a time when the stories of warriors from all around the world were being shared as a result of World War I. And so here we get into some of the events that led up to a few battles that took place here in Niuhelewai. This map shows the Sandwich Islands, as Ellis included it in his book. And he says here that the chiefs who ruled these islands were when Captain Cook arrived were Taraiopu, Kahekiri, Taporiorani, and Taeo. Yeah, and so this is a map that William Ellis presented in his book, and it's a map of the Sandwich Islands, as we were named after some British earl. But you can clearly see on here the 4 separate kingdoms that were present prior to Kamehameha uniting all of the islands under one mo'i or one kingdom. So this is similar to the counties in Hawaii today. Today the counties in Hawaii are Hawaii County, which is Hawaii Island, Maui County, which is Maui Nui, Maui and the other islands nearby, Molokai, Lanai, and Kaho'olawe. And Oahu is known as Honolulu County, and Kauai County includes Kauai and Niuhelewai. And so, similar to that, there were oftentimes 4 separate kingdoms. And the uniting of the islands was not a new idea that Kamehameha came up with. And 12 generations prior to him uniting the islands, there was a Hawaii island chief named Kalonui who had made his way from Hawaii and taken over Maui Nui all the way over to Oahu, but he could not subdue Kauai. And so when Captain Cook arrives, he sees these 4 distinct kingdoms. And when he spends time on Hawaii Island, it is Kalaniʻopuʻu who is the mo'i there. But when Kalaniʻopuʻu dies shortly after, Hawaii Island has its own civil war amongst the next generation, where Kamehameha emerges victorious over his cousins and then makes his way to take over the other islands. At the same time that Hawaii Island is having its own civil war, the Maui chief Kahekili was working on creating a larger kingdom amongst the Middle Islands and uniting Oahu under Maui. Kahekili was known as Pa'ele Kulani. He was called this because he had tattooed his body, and many of his warriors had done the same. And half of his body was tattooed black, like the thunder god Kanehekili, for whom he was named. When they describe Kahekili, he was known to love war, and he was a very skilled warrior. Kamehameha, the Hawaii Island chief, was actually considered a child of Kahekili. He was considered po'olua, or what we would describe as having 2 fathers. So one of his fathers was Kaua, and his other father was Kahekili, the mo'i of Maui. And so when Kamehameha works on uniting Hawaii Island under himself, because of this relationship that he had with Kahekili, Kahekili doesn't actually go to war with Kamehameha, and instead sends a message to him saying, hey, after I die, then you come and invade my kingdom. And so Kamehameha waits until Kahekili dies, and then he goes and makes his way over. Surely Kamehameha, being such a skilled warrior, must be due in part to his father Kahekili. So we actually have 2 battles that happened here in Niuhelewai, and they have to do with the Maui chiefs taking over Oahu. Yeah. At one point, the Oahu Council of Chiefs decide to remove the ruling chief Kukona and replace him with someone else. And they go and choose Kahahana to replace him. Kahahana is the son of an Ewa chief named Elani, and he's very high-ranking, and he's also the nephew of Kahekili, and he's been raised on Maui. So Kahahana returns to Oahu as the ruling chief, and tells his uncle, hey, let me know what you need. And Kahekili requests from him pretty much and says, oh, I just need Kualoa. I'll just take Kualoa. Just one area, just this small spot, just Kualoa. So Kahahana turns around to tell his uncle's wishes to his kahuna. But when Ka'opulupulu, his kahuna, hears about his wishes, he denies him and pretty much describes how Kualoa is such an important land for many different reasons, and that he's not able to give it, especially since Kahahana did not conquer Oahu, but instead it was gifted to him or given to him. So Kahahana denies Kahekili, and Kahekili starts to create mistrust amongst Kahahana and his kahuna, who happens to be the older brother of Kahekili's kahuna. And so eventually Kahahana kills his kahuna, and this fulfills some prophecies. At some point, when Kalaniʻopuʻu comes from Hawaii Island to invade Maui, Kahekili calls to Kahahana, and Kahahana sends aid to his uncle and prevents a takeover of Maui from the Hawaii Island chiefs. But instead of reciprocating that aloha and maintaining their alliance, instead the Maui chiefs, they invade Oahu. The Maui chiefs land at Waikiki, and under the command of Kahahawai, one of Kahekili's warriors, he leads a battle against Kahahana. Kahahana actually flees, but the result of this is that the stream of Niuhelewai here in Kapalama was dammed with bodies from the battle. So Kahahana fled, was living in the boonies for a few years before he was found and later killed. Another name of an area nearby is called Waipilopilo, and this area was named because of the bad smell that came from the stream because it was full of dead bodies from the massacre of the Maui chiefs over the Oahu chiefs. And there was actually a second time where the stream of Niuhelewai was dammed again. So a little while later, Kahahana's father, Elani, he leads a rebellion from the area of Ewa. And so there's a handful of Ewa chiefs that gather and plan this rebellion, and their plan is to attack all of their Maui occupiers in different locations on the same night. But word gets out to Kahekili's son Kalanikupule, and he warns his father. And so instead, this resulted in Kahekili putting down the rebellion of the Oahu chiefs. And again, the stream of Niuhelewai was dammed with bodies. And the rebellious plans of those Ewa chiefs of Oahu was called Waipi'o Kimopo because it was in Waipi'o where they planned, where they made plans for these attacks. Again, a'ole i pau.